Live and ready to go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar today. Just a few quick housekeeping notes before we start. First, we are recording this webinar to post online for all of you to view in the future. And second, we're going to save questions and answers until the speakers have finished presenting. For Q&A, we're going to be using the chat box on the side of the screen. Hopefully it's working. If it doesn't work, sometimes it has a little bit of a temper. We'll just use the Lifespan email, so you can be prepared to email us at lifespan@brockue.ca. Please feel free to just collect any questions that you have throughout, and if the chat box is working, you can submit them and we'll keep track throughout the event. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Tim Kenyon, the Vice President Research here at Brock University, who will be providing our opening remarks and our land acknowledgement, particularly on an important day like today, June 21st. So I turn the virtual floor over to you, Dr. Kenyon.
Thank you so much, Jane, and thanks to everyone attending. Good afternoon, and welcome to Who Volunteers These Days Anyway? Lessons Learned from Lifelong Volunteers in the Age-Friendly Niagara Movement. Features the research of Drs. Mia Narasimha, Polly Gardner, and students Juria Nanendran and Jacqueline Ryder. Today's event is part of the Lifespan Institute Speaker Series, which is a regular series of presentations that's designed to connect and engage with the community around research that's going on at Brock. Support for this event has been provided by Brock's Office of Research Services. So we begin the gathering by acknowledging that the land on which Brock University rests and on which many of us gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties, and it's within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, it's a gathering place that's home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and we acknowledge this to remind ourselves that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and the great friendship of Indigenous people. This is, as Jane noted, particularly important to observe on National Indigenous Peoples Day, as discoveries continue of thousands of graves marked and unmarked, the victims of decades of violent erasure directed towards Indigenous youth, wrongly described as a school system. To this day, Indigenous people living in Canada are massively underrepresented in post-secondary educational experiences and research of the kind that we're undertaking, and are overrepresented in the carceral system. And as long as these realities persist, we're all called to not turn away, face these truths, and to work practically and concretely to reverse them. On which point, volunteers are a backbone of society. And people donate their time, their energy, their skills, their initiative, their expertise to achieving goals that benefit the wider community. They set up events, take patients to appointments, they teach kids to read, collect donations, and create websites, all to advance community organizations and shared values. Today, we have an opportunity to hear expert insights about the benefits and challenges of volunteerism. This presentation will remind us the importance of volunteers and discuss also how we can make a difference through our own lives. One local group that relies heavily on volunteers is the Age-Friendly Niagara Network. Formed in 2013, the network plans and oversees regional-level activities to build a community for all ages. This is part of the World Health Organization's Global Age-Friendly Communities movement, which began in 2008. A Brock University research team, led by Dr. Mia Narasimha, has partnered with Age-Friendly Niagara to study volunteerism, specifically the experiences of the network's older adult volunteers, their challenges, and their suggestions for supporting their efforts. The research aims to enable the Age-Friendly Niagara group to devise strategies that sustain current volunteers and motivate others to join their volunteer network. It's a partnership that's a wonderful example of Brock University committing to creating dynamic and mutually enriching collaborations with the community around us, something that I know I and my colleagues all very strongly believe in And joining us today to share stories from lifelong volunteers about how volunteering improves health and well-being are 4 members of Brock's research team. Dr. Mia Narashima is Associate Professor of Health Sciences. Her research interests include aging and well-being, community-based education for health promotion, lifelong learning and development, volunteerism and community capacity building, and the social determinants of health and equity, along with cross-cultural studies between Canada and Japan. Dr. Polly Gardner is Associate Professor of Health Sciences, who focuses on the social factors that influence community mobility among older adults, health and design, critical, visual, and transformative research methodologies, and mindfulness and mental health among post-secondary students. Jacqueline Ryder is in their 2nd year of the Master of Arts in Applied Health Sciences, Community Health at Brock. Jacqueline is a research assistant on this project. Also joining as a research assistant is Madhurya Nanendran. Madhurya has just completed their undergraduate degree in public health with a minor in environmental sustainability at Brock. This fall, Madhurya will be starting the Master of Arts in Applied Health Sciences, specializing community health at Brock. 2 other members of the research team, Professor of Nursing Lynn McCree and Research Assistant May Lowe, were unable to join us today. I'm sure you, like I, will enjoy listening to the rich and diverse experiences that age-friendly Niagara volunteers have gained over decades and how we can translate this to our own lives and community. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kenyon, for a wonderful introduction. How beautiful. What a great way to get us started today. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. So as Tim mentioned, our goal today is to highlight what we've learned about volunteering, and specifically why people volunteer and what they gain from doing so. We hope that whoever you are and wherever you work, whatever organization or school you're a part of, that you'll be able to use what we share with you today in your own lives and in your own communities. Our plan for the day is we're going to start by providing you with a snapshot about volunteerism in Canada. We'll then provide a few details about our research study, share some stories of the older adult volunteers in the Niagara region that we met and learned so much from. And then we'll end with some take-home messages for everyone.
Thank you, Polly. So let's start looking at the snapshot of volunteering in Canada. The most recent National Volunteer Survey was conducted by the Statistics Canada in 2018. According to this report, over the 24 million people volunteered in that year, aged 15 years old and older. And then this means about 8 out of 10 Canadians volunteered their time. On average, each people volunteered 206 hours a year. And if you combine everything together, it is going to be total 5 billion hours a year. This is equivalent to 2.5 million full-time jobs. Another report mentioned the volunteers' contribution to the Canadian economy is about 2.6% of the whole total GDP. And when you look at this pie chart, you can see there are 2 types of volunteering. One is formal, the other one is informal. Informal, of course, it's you are just helping out, like a grocery shopping or mowing the lawn to your neighbors. But the formal volunteering, which we are focusing today, is you are spending and contributing your time to the community organization, mostly nonprofit organizations. And as you can see, 6% focusing contributed to the formal volunteering, and 35% is both formal and informal volunteering, and then 38% non-formal informal volunteering only. So where do they do the volunteering is the next slide. So these formal volunteers, they spend most of the time in the hospitals, religious organization, and sports and recreation, and arts and cultures. These are the 4 sectors. Most of the Canadians spend more than 100 hours to support their services and cares. And then what do they do is the next slide, please. So most of the formal volunteers are doing these 5 activities. 1, event organization and fundraising. 2nd, sitting on the committees or board. And 3rd, teaching or mentoring, and collecting, serving, and delivering foods. And then advice or counseling. So those 5 are the common activities of the formal volunteering, and our age-friendly volunteers, which we are going to talk about today, are the people who are sitting on the committees or board. So next is Polly.
Thanks, Mia. This is kind of interesting. So this is a slide that illustrates the generational differences of formal volunteering. And I think it's kind of cool because I think sometimes we think that volunteering is really something mostly that older adults do. But as this slide shows, volunteer happens across the life course. And I think that that's exciting. There's some differences, of course. Notice that while the number of people volunteering decreases as we age, so 52% for the iGens and 32% for the older adults or the matures, the number of hours of volunteering increases as we age. So number of people decreases and number of hours increases. So from 82 for the iGen generation to over 222 for older adults, which is quite significant. And the type and motivation for volunteering also changes over time. So for the iGen, volunteering is often tied to school credits or graduation requirements or co-op placements that they have to do. Whereas the older adults that we're going to speak about are more internally motivated and have much more freedom and flexibility in their volunteer experiences.
Another difference that we found in the literature on Stats Canada was the gender difference. As we can see by this chart, women were more likely to volunteer compared to men in their age group. However, we can see that this is pretty even.
So now let's look at the benefits of and barriers to volunteering. So the benefits of volunteering for anyone are staying active, social networking, so we can meet new people who share common interests and goals. We can get a rewarding feeling by helping the community and other people. It builds self-confidence, resilience, and self-esteem, and it can give us a sense of purpose. So here are some benefits that are especially for the health and well-being of older adults. So there are strong associations being found between higher level of happiness and those of lower socioeconomic status, a positive effect and resilience and having more chronic conditions, reduced depression and older people with dual sensory loss, reduced mortality in non-drivers, especially in rural areas, reduced mortality and older adults with low social interaction, and older volunteers are on average healthier, wealthier, and younger, and have more education. So in other words, often those who face the most barriers to volunteering would benefit the most from volunteering.
In addition to those benefits that Majulia mentioned, previous studies also found the wider benefit of volunteering to the communities. Although often invisible, volunteers are everywhere in our society, filling the gaps in services, providing care and warmth in each community. The value of community volunteering is not only the outcomes, but also in the process. So civic engagement and direct participation in community services with others empowers and generate the sense of belonging to the community and building the social trust and towards your neighbors. And also it's expanding the social networks among the community members and community organizations. So it will lead to the community cohesion. In relation to the older volunteers, studies have highlighted the crucial role of the volunteering for aging in place. Older adult volunteers are valuable community assets or co-producers of healthy aging services for themselves and others.
When looking at the barriers to volunteering for anyone, Stats Canada released this bar graph showing that why non-volunteers don't volunteer. And one of the main reasons we found as shown here is because they didn't have enough time and that they were unable to make a long-term commitment. And most of them preferred to give money rather than time. So this might suggest that more people might be able to volunteer if it was on a short-term commitment. But I'd like to draw your attention to our final point, which interestingly, non-volunteers didn't become involved in their community was because nobody had asked them to. So this suggests that if people were approached in the right way, that they might sign up to volunteer. This slide just shows the barriers to volunteering in later life. So it's a bit similar to a previous slide, but we've highlighted a couple more that is specifically for the older adults, which include health issues, physical functioning, and transportation, or a lack of transportation. So really figuring out how we can make it easier and more accessible for really any volunteers to travel to and from meetings or community events could potentially attract more volunteers, specifically those in their later life.
We need volunteers. There are many organizations and schools and hospitals and neighborhoods that require a strong, sustainable, bright, varied cadre of people to volunteer their time to ensure many of the programs and events that we all attend actually still are maintained. Often we don't even know who's volunteering. There's concerns, however, right now. Lots of people are asking, what is going to happen when a lot of the older adults who are dedicating, as we said, over 200 hours, what happens when they stop volunteering? Is volunteerism dead or dying? As Jacqueline just mentioned, people are looking for short-term kinds of volunteering or what we call episodic volunteering. Is there enough of that available and do people know about it? Who's going to step up? Who has the time? This idea of we don't have enough time, or at least our perceptions of not having enough time for volunteering. How do we deal with that? And who knows where to find volunteer opportunities these days? And now on top of those challenges, we've had to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. And this has been a devastating blow to many organizations who rely on volunteers. With the repleted lockdowns and reopenings, many volunteers have been lost in the process of the last few years. And some of our most dedicated volunteers going into the pandemic were hit the hardest. So the older adults, for example, face so many challenges, and in particular technological ones, as society and activities shifted online. The baby boom generation, who do some volunteering themselves, had much less time as they struggled to keep their businesses afloat, worked from home, cared for elderly parents, etc. And even the iGen population said that their planned work placements were delayed or canceled. 35% of them reported this in recent research. This has been kind of devastating to volunteers and organizations that rely on volunteers over the past few years.
So let's move on to the age-friendly Niagara movement. So the Niagara region consists of 12 municipalities. It is one of the most gray areas in Canada, where the population of 65 years and older is expected to double by 2031. In 2008, the region joined the World Health Organization's Global Age-Friendly Cities and Communities movement. And by 2011, the Age-Friendly Niagara Network was formed by several volunteers. And then less than 10 years later, 10 of the 12 local municipalities formed their own age-friendly advisory committees, thanks to the Age-Friendly Niagara Network's continuous outreach.
So in 2007, the World Health Organization launched the Global Age-Friendly Cities and Communities Project, and it consists of 8 domains. For example, you can see here transportation, housing, social participation. And so in Niagara, as Jacqueline mentioned before, we have a very active age-friendly movement. And basically, an age-friendly community is a community for all ages.
Okay, so our study, as Maduria and Jacqueline mentioned, the Age-Friendly Niagara movement has been successfully expanded across the Niagara region over the last 10 years. However, when the movement moved into the second decade, like many other age-friendly communities around the world, they are having a little bit of the growing pains. So, especially in terms of the how to sustain and implement their action plan. So we worked closely together in partnership with the Age-Friendly Niagara Council Advisory Group, and we designed our studies. So our research question is focusing on the sustainability of volunteering. What approaches are needed to sustain current age-friendly volunteers, and where for motivating to others to join? And we focused on 4 different areas and asked questions for volunteers. So activities and motivations and benefit and challenges and barriers, and most importantly, their suggestions to sustain their current effort. We wanted to directly hear their voices because they are the expert on this topic.
So we conducted a qualitative case study research project, and we did this in 2 phases. So in phase 1, we interviewed 8 of the Leadership Council as key informant one-on-one interviews. And we really tried to learn from them the context in which we were entering this study. What was the age-friendly movement? What was its history? What was its mandate? And also some of the inner workings and processes of the council itself. In phase 2, and we used what we learned in phase 1 to organize our focus groups and ask questions. In phase 2, we conducted 9 focus groups with 9 of the different municipalities, the advisory committees, and also they hand-selected some older volunteers who were really dedicated and passionate in each of the municipalities and had a lot of experience there. Prior to the focus groups, most participants also finished or completed brief online surveys from us. So we had data from the surveys, the focus groups, and the key informant interviews, which we used for our analysis and which we'll share in our findings. Due to the pandemic, of course, all of our research was conducted using Zoom, which, as we said, has created some interesting challenges, both for our participants and for those of us who have never done focus groups online before. It was an interesting but very fruitful process.
So these are our research findings. So over the course of our study, we met over 60 older adults. They were champions of the age-friendly movement. So the mean age was 69. Most were women and had completed post-secondary or higher. They lived with their spouse, family, or others, and they were born in Canada. And one of our interesting findings was that 88% of the participants were involved in multiple volunteer work. So these are the some common activities of the 8 municipality committees. So they completed community needs assessments, they provided advice to the local councils, and they advocated for a better community for all. And we learned that these actions have led to various tangible positive changes over the years.
So in our demographic survey before the focus group, we also asked their current health, self-perceived health state. And as you can see in this pie chart, orange, blue, and purple, excellent, very good, and good. So most of the participants actually said, reported their overall health state right now, healthy, from good to excellent. Of course, our study cannot determine whether volunteering helps them to be healthy or healthier people volunteer. Perhaps both. During the focus group discussions, we heard that several long-term volunteers had to stop volunteering due to age-related health issues. Nevertheless, this result is not surprising given the benefit on health and well-being of volunteering, which was found in previous studies, as we mentioned before.
So these are some examples of changes made in each community. So there was a hospice in the city of Welland, affordable housing in the city of Thorold, the pilot bus project in the city of Niagara Falls, and a new community center in the town of Pelham. And all of these areas can be found on the World Health Organization's 8 domains.
Okay, so let's meet some of the older adult volunteers that participated in our study. And what we want to do is try and share some of their stories with you. They were so rich and diverse and interesting and fun and funny. But because of ethics, of course, we can't identify individuals. So what we've done, and this has actually helped a lot with our analysis, is we generated some composites that we think represent 4 main types of volunteers that we saw reflected in our data, and includes their particular motivations and perceived benefits for volunteering. So these are 4 sort of prototypes, and it'd be interesting to think about if these translate to your own organizations. Are these the kind of volunteers that you see in your organizations or schools? Be kind of interesting to talk about maybe during the Q&A.
So let's meet Nancy. Nancy is 73 years old. She has lived in Niagara her whole life. After graduating, she worked in the field of gerontology until retirement. And as soon as she retired, she began volunteering in her municipality's committee, where she advocates for a better community for all ages. She is the chair of her Older Adult Advisory Committee and a member on many other boards as well. Nancy's passion is to make her community a better place, and she says, quote, "I want to make life better for older adults." She's a strong leader, and seeing her community become an age-friendly place with all of their advocacy and achievements is what motivates her to keep volunteering. During our research, we met many people like Nancy, and Nancy is what we would call a trailblazer of the age-friendly Niagara movement.
So meet Richard. Richard is someone who we'd call a continuing self type volunteer. So Richard is 81 years old. He worked in Toronto for 23 years as an engineer before deciding to take a new job opportunity in the Niagara region. While working in Niagara, Richard found volunteer opportunities within his line of work. He was motivated to volunteer on the engineering committees to offer his knowledge and skills, but to also expand. He states, "For me, was meeting people working in different areas of engineering than my own, and just getting to know a lot of people. So that part of it was very attractive to me." Once Richard retired and ultimately no longer had a seat on his engineering committee, he looked for volunteer communities in his community. He says, "Being retired is also an opportunity to maintain my skills from my former work to continue." Richard wanted to use the skills and knowledge he built up from his career to help keep his community safe. "I wanted to contribute," he says. "For me, as a former engineer, safety is important. I want to make things safe for people." For Richard, volunteering is a way for him to continue doing what he loves, to use the knowledge and skills he has as an engineer to help his community. But for Richard, volunteering wasn't just about giving. The benefit was that volunteer also gives back. He says, "A major part of volunteering is seeing a need and getting involved. But it's a two-way process. You give and also receive. I met some great people, some great and different people in volunteering over the years."
So next, please meet Judith. Judith is a type of person who seeks for feeling together. So Judith is 80 years old and very active lifelong volunteers. Helping others has characterized her life since she was a child. She grew up in a community where people were always helping each other. Having taken care of her late husband for several years, she is now living by herself. Judith has a morning ritual. She makes at least 3 morning calls for her fellow volunteers at the senior centers who are also living alone. She said, quote, "Loneliness is a big issue. That's why I call, to let them know they are not alone. And it also helped me to get it started," unquote. For Judith, the best thing about volunteering is to meet the like-minded people. She stated, quote, "Everyone can feel togetherness. We are socially bonded by the same cause. We also have a lunch, a tea, or even exchange clothing at the volunteer sites. It's a nice way to create your social safety net," unquote. Another important motivation for Judith is to be a role model for her family. In her words, quote, "I wanted to show my grandson what the grandma can do because I want him to do the same," unquote. And the best rewards, she told me, is the appreciation shown by her large social support network and the friendships that she has developed over the years through her volunteering. So many people stopped by with cards and flowers on her 80th birthday.
Okay, so now let's meet Charlie. Charlie we would call an adventurer type of volunteer. Charlie is 69, and when he retired a few years ago, he moved from Toronto to the Niagara region. Charlie wanted to make a life in Niagara and to meet new people and to have some adventures in his old age. He told us, "I moved into this community 4 years ago, and the first thing I did was to get involved in this committee." Settling into his retirement after a long and busy career, one of the main motivations to volunteer for Charlie was to expand his activities and to try something new. "After 40 years in healthcare," he told us, "I wanted to try something really different. I had no experience of art before, for example, but I just jumped right into it. Starting something new is what motivates me. Charlie also started volunteering because he wanted to meet people. I'm a social person, he said. I do enjoy interacting with people on the committee and at all the community events. The trainings that some volunteer organizations provide are really interesting to Charlie and others who are looking to grow and expand their knowledge and activities as they get older. Challenging yourself to try something new and to learn something new, these are the things that I otherwise would not have known about, he told us. So Charlie's met new people and he's made new friends on the Age-Friendly Committee, and he's tried new things and he's learned new skills along the way. In the end, however, perhaps the real benefit of volunteering for Charlie is that it gives him a sense of belonging as well as a sense of adventure. I got involved in this community, he told us, and now this is my home.
So, as you could hear from these stories, most participants in our study were active retirees with rich life experience, diverse skill and knowledge. Many want to keep contributing their time and their strengths, their skills to make positive changes in their communities. This also brings personal benefits such as life satisfaction, sense of purpose, and social support networks to many of them. And this constitutes what we call the virtuous cycle for both individuals and communities. These needs and rewards are connected to their later life stage, and each feeds each other to keep encouraging current order volunteers to continue their generative work.
So now, as we promised before, we're going to have some take-home messages that we learned from the volunteers. So for the individuals, we mentioned all the benefits to volunteering early, so just volunteer, it's good for you. Get others involved, so involve your family members, your friends, and don't let the lack of time stop you. There are many opportunities that are short and long-term and can be done when you have time. So choose what you are passionate about. Like the stories we mentioned earlier, these volunteers looked for opportunities in areas that they liked and continued their work even after they retired. Just try it. There are many organizations looking for volunteers, and you might find something you want to continue as you age. Find a balance so that you don't burn out. Make sure you manage your time with volunteering, family, and work or school. So stop thinking about that one experience from that one time in high school. So I remember when I did volunteering in high school, it wasn't what I expected. And it wasn't until this research project that I really understood what volunteering was about. And finally, one of our participants mentioned, quote, "We view volunteerism as a win-win-win. It's good for the individual, good for our organization, and good for the community," end quote. So someone always wins in volunteering.
Here's some take-home messages for organizations. So those of you who work for organizations, either in the volunteerism or maybe an administrative position, here's some suggestions we have from what we learned. First of all, advertise, advertise, advertise. As we mentioned in that snapshot, there's a lot of Canadians and a lot of people who live in the region who don't know what's available, and they feel like nobody's asked them to volunteer, and some might if we do. So make sure you use a variety of strategies for advertising, different types of media to advertise so that you reach different audiences. Next, make sure you match your volunteers' needs, which we've talked about, and interests, with the activities that you would like volunteers to participate in. That matching process was highlighted by our participants as something that was really important to their sustainability. If they had a good experience, particularly in the first time they volunteered, it's much more likely they're going to stick with it. Training, again, as Charlie mentioned, training is really important. You don't want to leave people feeling like they don't know what's being expected of them. And also they want to learn new skills. Think intergenerational and increase diversity. So people are really interested, and this is what they told us, in working with people across ages, across ethnicities, across sexual orientations, across age groups, and that this is really a way to build a sense of community as well as to kind of get the job done. Respect and recognition, so show them the love. Most of our volunteers really appreciated when people reached out and they were shown respect and recognized with awards or in the newspaper, that this was important, as it would be. Reduce barriers, so we've discussed this already a little bit. For example, offering free transportation or transportation support, offering training, really reducing the barriers. I think about people with young families, for instance. This wasn't the case for our participants, but maybe offering childcare. Or as some of our volunteers or lifelong volunteers would say, bring the family along, and make sure that that's okay when you allow them to volunteer or encourage them to volunteer. And finally, of course, listen to your volunteers. As we've said over and over, they are our experts, and people want to know that you're listening. As one of our participants explained, show people how it's relevant to their aspirations, and if they aspire to do things, then show how this volunteering can help them in their future work. So help people make the connection.
And our final message is for the municipal government. So show them the money. It doesn't have to be much, but as you saw with our examples of our volunteer achievements, a little investment will definitely go a long way with these individuals. Show them that you think their work is important. In this community, they're your partner for community building. So really show them that what they're doing is important work, and support their work. So do things like providing space for them, for the volunteers and staff, and most importantly, listen to your volunteers. You know, treat them as an equal. They're your experts, and if they suggest things, then please use them. And finally, nurture the culture of volunteerism in communities. So we can do this by planting, the seeds of volunteering among children, either through family, schools, and businesses. And we can do that by supporting and networking with various community voluntary organizations and creating opportunities for all family members to get involved in volunteering.
Okay, so taking account of all these suggestions from all the volunteers, we would like to introduce one great example of volunteer education program. The program is called Seniors Volunteers in Pelham program, aka BIP program. This program is led by the Pelham Senior Advisory Committee in partnership with their local government and other stakeholders. They actually wrote the proposal together to get the federal funding. But it's sometimes very daunting to start something new in later life. But this program helps to reduce many barriers. For example, they are actually proactively outreach and recruit the seniors who are high risk of being socially isolated. And then they are also providing a day-long training program by the Active Living Coordinator and municipal staff with free lunch, with a little social opportunity. And then there is no cost involved for police checking, police background check. And once they finish the training, they treat the volunteers as an ambassador of Pelham. And these ambassadors as a valuable, visible face of the Pelham community to meet the greet and giving information and helping choosing activities at the Pelham community centers. So this type of program, we don't even think about the volunteer needs education, but the volunteers' benefits can be educated to many people so that many people are more interested in volunteer programs. So finally, if someone who are listening to this webinar who are interested in start volunteering in this month, please try to go to the volunteer center near in your areas. In Niagara, we have a volunteer center called In Communities. So you can go there and you find the volunteer matching program. And you can also dial 211 from anywhere in Ontario to find the information for the volunteering opportunities. And Ontario Volunteer Networks and Volunteer Canada's, those are the good places to find more opportunities and informations. And finally, we would like to thank you for all these people who make this research project possible. Our community partner, Age Friendly Niagara Council, thank you so much. And our participants, more than anybody who could share your valuable information, your thoughts with us. And then liaison person who helped us recruitment, thank you so much. And most of all, our Age Friendly Advisory Committee members, Dominic, Jane, Mary, Doug, thank you so much for your guidance throughout the study. And our team members, May and Lynn. And finally, thank you for SHARC Partnership Engage Grant to fund this awesome program. We really learning a lot from this whole process.
Awesome. Thank you so much to our presenters for that wonderful presentation. It's time for Q&A. The chat function is working on LifeSize. I'll let the speakers know a different chat than our little internal chat here. It's on the LifeSize platform, so you can't see it, but I can. But we do have 3 questions that have come in. So the first one was kind of a little bit about evaluation, asking like, what does success look like for this kind of age-friendly initiative, and what does success look like for you as the kind of developing research team? Are there any plans around evaluating the age-friendly initiative, or is that already in the works?
Okay, that is a very good question. Evaluation part. Evaluation is not the main goal of this research project. We would like to find out what they are doing, first of all, to find out. But throughout the research process, we found out there are so many achievements, the age-friendly committees made in each community, as Julia actually presented some of the examples. And we found it's surprisingly, their scale of the volunteerism and their achievement is really big. So that is one of the things what we saw as a success indicator over the last 10 years of this volunteer program, and also the networking, the expansion over the last 10 years from the little seeds growing into the whole regions and making all age-friendly seniors and wellness committees across the region. That is one of the success indicator we found out. In terms of the team part, maybe Polly, you'd like to answer that part.
Well, I can just add a couple of things. It's a good question. I was fascinated. Each of the municipalities and their age-friendly committees were involved in their own evaluation themselves, which is, I think, this is a partnership engagement grant, and we are community-based researchers. So our research questions come from the community. And this was something that they highlighted that they had concerns about. So they're very interested themselves in tracking. And I know that they will know if it's successful if they're able to maintain and build this cadre of volunteers. And they provided some amazing suggestions, some of which we discussed today, which each municipality will be implementing. And of course, they'll implement the ones that make sense for them. Like rather than try and do this region-wide, I think one of the things about the age-friendly movement is it really goes down to a neighborhood level, because every neighborhood is slightly different, of course, and has different needs. And so I think they'll be tracking themselves. It would be interesting to check back in and see how they're doing. But I think that really the main point of evaluation will be, in a few years, do they still have volunteers? Do they still have strong cadre? And do they have more diversity? That was something that they were looking for.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I'll remind everyone, you don't have to, I think some people are thinking they've got to email in. You don't have to email in. You can, because that one came in over email to me, but you can use the chat as well. But this one came in during registration. I want to comment I know you commented on these a little bit throughout your presentation, but I grouped these questions that came in around sustainability, around what would be needed to keep keep this initiative going. And I really think on your municipal slide, you hit on it, or the show me the money, right? That these initiatives aren't free. They're not entirely expensive, but things are needed, and volunteers do need to be recognized. Is there any broader big points around sustainability for something like the Age Friendly Initiative and all the multitude of projects they have going on, or even your research project itself, sustainability points you'd want to really hammer on during this final point?
If I may start, I think sustainability also depends on how much partnership and networking you can create as a infrastructure of the community. So how you find out the resources and how you mobilize them together to make it as a partners and working together. That could be, in the long run, it's going to be sustain the whole structures and manpowers. Maybe some other people, other group members have some opinions, so please go ahead.
No other thoughts? That's fine. Oh, Polly, I saw you unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure, I can add. I was waiting to see if our students, who, by the way, we should call on them at some point, because they are just been amazing through this process, and they've really learned so much about volunteering. Yeah, it's been just a pleasure working with them and watching us all as a group kind of grow and learn together. But I think that this municipal government support, I don't think we can state how significant that is enough. It really is. And we're not talking about a lot of money. These are small annual funds that show that are just really being used in really effective ways. Partially, that's the point. But also, I think what it says is, you're in our budget, you have a budget line. You are important to our government and our community. And I can't see why a government, if you're a decision maker on this call, like, get in there, support these. I mean, it's just a win. You look good. You all look good because of these volunteers. And so showing up at the table makes them feel respected and somebody's listening. And then providing them with some small funds. It would be great if they were larger funds, of course, but at least something to get them started is just, we can't say strongly enough how important that is. And then the second thing I would say is leadership. We met some incredible champions, older adults who are volunteering, not just for this organization, but for many organizations, and have done so over their lives. And these people just are so inspiring and motivating, not just to other volunteers, but to us. It's really inspired all of us to get more serious about our volunteering efforts. And so I think recognizing, identifying, and really drawing from our champions in terms of their leadership is really going to help with sustainability.
Yeah.
Awesome. and maybe there's one more question we've got. We've got about 2 minutes for this one, and maybe I'll pass it to Madhuri and Jacqueline first. It's around portability is kind of what I lumped some of these questions that have come in. Adaptability. How easily do you think this kind of initiative that we see in Niagara, this research project that went along, but also the Age-Friendly Niagara Initiative, how easily do you think this initiative could be adapted to other local contexts? Like, is this something that you could just take what Niagara did and put in? How do you see that working? Any thoughts around that adaptability and piece in there?
I can start. I think what Niagara did is like something that a lot of communities can kind of play off of, because what they started off, like, they have really good leadership, as Polly mentioned, the trailblazers. So these are the people that kind of get things started. So I think if different cities or towns find people that are like-minded, who have like strong leadership skills, I think that is the first step. And then following kind of what Niagara did, and like putting out advertisements like, this is something we want to get started. This is not only for older adults, like it's something that we want for all ages. Yeah, so I think following what Niagara did is a good way for a lot of other communities to get like age-friendly committees started.
Yeah, I agree with Vajuria. It really starts with the trailblazers, people who are real leaders who want to make change in their communities. And it's all like transferability. So taking the idea that, or how Niagara has created their network, and transferring some of those things to like your own community and finding what's needed in that community. Like focusing on the different organizations, who are community members, and really having those leaders to really focus in on, what does our community need? Taking what we've learned from Niagara, focusing on the organizations in that community, because each community is different. But as Madhuri said, having those trailblazers to really hone in and, lead this is what. And then also the municipality getting their support with everything is crucial. But I think it's definitely something that can be transferred from community to community.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And I'm happy that we were able to get our students involved in that discussion. That does wrap up all the time we have for Q&A. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question. If you did submit a question and we didn't get to it, please feel free to reach out to our speakers directly, or you can email Lifespan at lifespan@brockU.ca. We can connect you. I'm now going to introduce Dr. Tina Willoughby, the director of the Lifespan Institute, who will be providing just a quick closing remark. I turn the floor to you, Dr. Willoughby.
Thank you, Jane. First, I'd like to thank our speakers today for presenting about their work and for the collaborative research that they talked about. It's wonderful to see how the Age-Friendly Niagara Initiative is such a case study for the importance and benefits of volunteering. And second, thanks to, of course, our Brock's Office of Research Services for providing support to make this event possible. And thanks to all of you who joined us today. The Lifespan Institute truly values the discussions that have been sparked by this speaker series, and we're proud of the space that they have created to allow researchers, partners, and all of you to join together to connect and learn about staying healthy across the lifespan. We will be posting a recording of today's event online, and we'll email you when that is available. Also, we now will be taking a break from the speaker series over the summer months, but we have a full lineup of speakers for the fall. So we will connect with all of you when registration opens for those talks in the fall. And on that note, it's time for us to end. So thank you all again. Stay healthy and enjoy your summer.